I will try to speak somehow as free as possible about the capillaries of communication. And I have to explain first what I mean with capillaries. And this has to do with our project because we are dealing with digital media, and digital media is very complex. A very complex kind of media, a very complex kind of mediation. We all have to deal with this kind of media, but theories are very poor when they analyze this new kind of phenomenon. Capillarity comes from the physics. It's a concept from the physics, a term used to determine the behavior of fluids in a porous environment or in capillaries tubes. In medicine, we have also the word capillar for endothelial tubes, very thin, and they connect the arterial circulation to the venous one. The term here is used to designate the permeability phenomena of the means of communication of media in the porosity of the social-cultural tissue, of the social-cultural life. And I will explain about 4 types of capillarities, or 4 types of capillaries. First of all, the gestural capillarity, then the alphabetical capillary, and then the electric capillary, and then the aeolian of the wind capillary. No media belongs only to one type of capillary. We are all here, and we have a physical presence, and we have a gestural capillary, but and this is nowadays very present, but we have also devices with aeolian capillary, and also devices with electric, and all of us have are literate. We are not analphabet, unliterate. And I begin with a short introduction and with a quotation of a philosopher, a Czech, Brazilian, Jewish philosopher of media, Wilhelm Flusser. And Wilhelm Flusser began a conference with a very intriguing sentence: "Space, here is my pain." And when Wilhelm Flusser announced his emblematic phrase, "Raum, das sind meine Schmerzen," in German, "Space, here is my pain," he made an amazing diagnosis of the contemporary media. He called stairs of abstraction very concrete in German, Treppe der Abstraktion, the irreversible process of descending climb of the media materiality. Such negative climb is progressively peeling the spatial dimension of media supports in favor of its non-think nature. An immaterial and fleeting existence, its path proposal follows the mediation processes since the life world, very concrete, in German Lebenswelt, until the non-things, in German Undinge. However, this has intermediate stations. In them, the philosopher reflects on with great and surprising wit what makes him one of the most incendiary proposers of a new discipline, new kind of media philosophy or media theory, an outline much more appropriated for the communication processes in its nature of mediation. Such outline enables at the same time, first, seeing the materiality of media with its complex significance load, historically and culturally, distancing itself from the excessive and misguided idea that the message has an idealistic content, which comes from a type of absolute spirit manifestation or from a reason disembodied and dematerialized. Second, dislocate the misguided attention that the conception of information inherited from the early technical investigations between connective machines and cybernetic systems thought. The classical model sender, receiver, source, channel this model removed history from any communicative process, which by itself is alive and filled with memories. And this model is also deterministic and determinable. Such idealization comes from the same absolute spirit, the same dematerialized reason, ignoring even the implicit probabilistic in the materials, its fidelity, its wariness, its proprieties and improprieties. The so-called theories of information and communication always ignore the probabilistic and the complexity of the processes in which the social, cultural actors, complex by themselves, have a crucial significance. Third, to build complex scenarios with the interaction with other social actors in the processes of communication, granting not only the materialization of each actor, but also shining a light on their others meaningful dimensions, such as their historical, cultural insertion, gestures, and performativity. This is a theme of Christoph Wolff, but also of ethology. This is a theme by Boris Cyrulnik, a French psychologist, or archaeology, or ecology of communication. All of them competing linguistically and discursively. This although undeniable present in human communication, let itself re-signify, transform, magnetize, or contamine by all those variables mentioned. Knowledge and studies aren't enough to embrace the complex phenomena of human communication. Communication studies or simply knowledge about communication. It's a interdisciplinary object. So there is an urgency in reviewing the parameters of communication theories as a discipline for extremely alive processes, amazingly effective in their diversified capillaries. If Flusser express his pain through the space matter, he is right, because contemporarily we're bound to relearn life in spaces that are without dimensions, abstract, absent of all speciality. Therefore, resizing will be an utopian job of rebuilding space from non-space. Mythical task of redemption of a cosmogony from a cosmos in effigy. What is intended here is a first reflection on spaces created by the different types of capillaries in the means of communication. Each type of capillarity will build an environment, just like some sort of irrigation creates farming, or vascularization creates a tissue. Well, now about the capillaries of face-to-face communication and the magic of capture. This was a concept or an idea developed by media theorist, pioneer of media thinking, German journalist and professor Harry Pross, who developed the epistemological basis for a media theory. He has had studied with the famous physician Victor von Weizsäcker, founder of psychosomatics in Germany in the 40s and 50s. And this root of his thinking has contributed strongly to the concept that our communication begins always with the body and ends in the body. And therefore, he calls it primary media. This is the primary media. And our body communicates through gestures, through smell, through images, through sounds, all of them natural things, natural languages. Taking the body as the starting point of all communication, he calls into question the very own communication concept as a simple connection. And relying on the anthropological and psychological thoughts of Dieter Wyss, and Dieter Wyss was also a student by Victor von Weizsäcker, lays the foundation of an understanding of communication as a basis that constitutes societies from the simplest to the most complex ones. The reference is that sexual division is the first distance to be transposed by signs, gesture, smells, and sounds, offering the former steps to a great net that today amplifies itself worldwide. Thus, primary media is nothing more than using our own body as a producer of language, gesture, sounds, movements, smells, features, postures. Evidently, there was where the first writing appeared, the one with the feet and footprints, much before the hands learned how to draw signs to mark a path. Writing with hands would, in its turn, transform once more the post-monkey Stein, who carries the memory of his arboreal life in the verticalization of his own spine. The primary media continues to repeat the adventures of human evolution in a miniaturized and aesthetic manner through the ontogenetic development of communication. Each newborn, all babies, reconquer the aerial world through their senses, their crying, their faces, their sense of smell, and their funny faces, their sucking and their burp, and are the early strategies to capture the world around them. If the primal communicative bonds in the ontogenesis could be translated as maternal love, it wouldn't take long for the former bonds typology is captured by the little human when he's fed with warmth and responds with gestures of satisfaction and satiety, replying the first act of love towards him. Studies about the ontogenesis of human communication have been eclipsed by the same utilitarian and rationalist thought that amputates complexity and doesn't recognize the need for multidisciplinarity, which instigates and feeds science. Thus, works like human ethology are ignored, throwing into darkness our own communicative foundations. Dieter Wyss lays in pre-predicative experiences of proximity and distance, high and low, the foundations that constitutes the spatial experience which rules the world. Ashley Montagu investigates the essence of the warmth and physical contact as fundamental assumptions to the development of the capacity to explore the world. Harry Harlow, in the 50s, in his daring experiments with rhesus monkeys, showed how the maternal bond is fundamental for the safety of the individual and the starting point for the other four basic affective systems. I'd rather call them 5 basic bond systems: maternal system, son-mother system, fraternal system, sexual system, and paternal system. It shouldn't be ignored the specific capillarity shaped by the power of gesture and its historical and cultural density, by the power of voice, its melody in dialogue with other voices of nature, by the subtle appeal of olfactory sensations in communication of intimacy, affection by touching, peace sign while being, the strength of the permeability of primary communication only with the languages and expressive resources of the body is far from being known in its multiple layers, deep densities, and roots planted in the remote animal origins of man, already permeated by the richness of the latest stories. Alphabetic capillaries and the many more wars of literacy. Accordingly to Jack Goody, were the tellers in temples who created alphabetic writing. Schmant Besserat proves the association between accountability and writing in his archaeological findings. Also, the latest findings of the Indus Valley bring us important information about the origins of writing. But other writings, pre-alphabetic or anti-alphabetic, pictographic or ideographic, may refute this utilitarian logic. What opposes this is a much deeper reason intricately planted in narratives, animations of our endogenous images. Complex body painting of different folk, their abstract Neolithic drawings, ceramics and its apparent decorative motifs possibly had a deeper motivation than economics or quantification of stocks in trading goods. Well, the motivation actually doesn't matter now. What matters is the language and signs left by those men on words, objects transformed later in writing. This is what builds the secondary media, which amplifies the natural action, the radius of the body. Those signs reinvent time, life, death, man, and world, constructing a narrative in infinite wires. And this is the main characteristic of the alphabetic capillary. The communicative bonds expand throughout the centuries. Literacy becomes advanced trench in the civilizing process. Secondary media gains vehicles of enormous reach and is able to create, conserve, and transport bonds like books, letters, sheets, newspapers, magazines, etc. Two challenges appear, however, on the literate world. First, transporting materials that bear writing, or self-transport to supports that maintain writing. Second, the most expensive and toilsome manufacturing readers. Well, we have to produce, the alphabetic world had to produce readers. And this was and is still very expensive. Well, writing and reading require initiation, which is not easy. Learning to read demands lifetime and leisure time, and the media thinker Harry Pross formulated, this is in German, die Langeweile des Lesens, in English, the slow languor of reading. It needs time to read and to think. The productive world is reluctant to offer to the working time generous and slow paths and also parallel narratives. Undertakes the working world only to capitulate when the work itself requires further logical refinement. Although the fundamental contradiction remains, because the reading art also require cultivation and permanent care. Thus, writing requires enormous investments throughout the centuries and demands, until today, an even bigger effort from countries or with countries, emergent countries, for instance. For this reason, writing capillaries reached only an average degree. Large segments of the world remained untouched or little touched by literacy, and besides, these segments seem today to be growing again in unusual ways of reading disability with the so-called neo-civilized illiteracy. Thereby, what I'd call capillaries of literacy, the ability to penetrate the world of perceptions and conveyed by alphabetic writing, is in decline. Declines evidently developed alphabetic writing, but not writing as a whole, which contaminates itself and recedes a new pictographic writing, a new ideogrammatic writing. Wertheimer Zimmer, as many other communication and cultural researchers, point out the problem and called it dumbing down strategies. The fact is that there is a growing segment of newspaper and magazines using secondary media like illustrations, graphics, headlines, loose sentences, micro news, text increasingly shorter, sentences becoming shorter, smaller and smaller stories. This not talking about occupation of logos and other writings, advertising and the contamination of writing by its persuasive universe. And then about electric capillaries and the serpent ritual and the snaking electrification. With electricity, it became possible a new type of mediation, the one that doesn't require transportation of the physical support of the message, like newspaper, magazines, books, but only the electrical impulse that transports itself through its own nets, being transformed again into sound or image in an apparatus acquired by the user for this finality. With the acquisition of the apparatus, the user passes in advance to co-finance the whole system of tertiary media. Tertiary media is the electric media in the electric capillary. Such system allows immediate transmission of voice, for instance, which if doesn't require any kind of specific decoding ability, or image that also doesn't need literacy when it's not followed by writing. Efforted investment in electrification networks becomes a unique attempt, and compared with the large range and high potential for transmissions, allow message providers a huge resource saving. This disproportional effort between supplier and user is named signal economy. Once installed, the electrical grid, once purchased the specific apparatus, the tertiary means inaugurate new relations of time and space. Time different from the slow time from writing and reading, from reflection and decoding, the time of instantaneity, but also transient. Your space becomes the space without distance and remoteness, only space of proximity, a space that brings the world in picture and sound to the user's private world, an illusory, absolute proximity. The way sounds and images invade the space and time of the user without requiring any skills learned inaugurates a new capillary. Permeability almost complete, only restricted by the on-off operations, still present in conventional apparatuses, but already abolished in instances of providers that transmit and operate continuously. The insanity enabled by the electrical means is the same of lightning, its natural manifestation described by myths. It is, therefore, a present figure in various mythologies. The lightning, divinity of extreme power or tool for gods of great power, which contaminate with their mythical meanings words transmitted by tertiary means. Associated with the images and history of cults, the tertiary media messages have a primordial skeleton predisposing them to a grandiose meanings and or catastrophic. Abi Warburg, an important iconologist and teacher of a generation of modern iconology thinkers, seeking to confirm his contemporary images' association with their corresponding Renaissance, medieval, and even archaic and mythical roots, in his explanation of the serpent ritual observed in the late 19th and early 20th century among the Pueblo Indians of New Mexico, his observation is that lightning is a kind of, the serpent is a kind of representation of lightning that binds heaven to earth, gods of the heaven and the gods of the earth. Warburg himself calls attention to the presence of mythical figures such as lightning and serpent. The snaking of wires in cities, as seen in the picture of the menace and its representations in classical antiquity and in the Renaissance. This is the electric capillarity. It's also a magic capillary, a magic bond between heaven and earth. And now about the wind capillaries and a catastrophe with no name. The same Harry Pross, 15 years after publishing his master work, Medienforschung, pioneer in media philosophy, invites Wilhelm Flusser to one of his barn seminars in his village in Weiler, Germany, to discuss one fashionable theme on the late 80s, Euro-nomadism. Flusser then spoke about 3 great catastrophes that hit man on his path through earth. Descent from the trees to the savannah forced him to nomadism. This is the so-called harmonization, the first catastrophe. After this, fixing himself in villages and cities on the Neolithic, and this is the second catastrophe. With this catastrophe, man could cedere in Latin, seed, and possedere, also in Latin, the same root of the word possedere is belong, settle and own property, collect possessions. This was the second catastrophe. The third catastrophe has just been planted. Those houses that which were our protection become uninhabitable because they're vulnerable to the winds of the media. They are full of holes, and through these holes comes in the hurricane of media. The new catastrophe is so new that it has no name, says Flusser. However, it prompts man to a return to a nomadic life, since his not being left alone in the comfort of his home, obliging him to live with the wind, the god of nomads. This is, without a doubt, a diagnosis of great sharpness. He doesn't have a home anymore, so it doesn't make sense to own, to belong things and accumulate things. Going back to nomadism means a return to man's original condition, letting his footprints throughout the savannah, following the unstable gods of the wind, obeying them. Although, with one important distinction, such neo-nomadism is done with no feet, with no body. The eyes are the ones who walk, float, fly, and surf with no rest. Thus, man's vulnerability to tertiary media enhances, here we have the wind capillaries with apparatuses forever on, and literacy disappearing. The wind enters permanently through all edges and holes, pockets and bags. Each time, and therefore said Flusser, time, here are my pains. Each time and space that belonged once to our body, ephemerality, and then to the conquest of literacy, permanence, and afterwards to the electricity, the velocity to bind earth and heaven together. This time and space belongs nowadays to the wind and its gods of fluidity. Thank you very much.